Pay attention, because a basketball analyst from Japan sat down this offseason fully intending to write the ending of an era. He came to declare the Golden State Warriors finished, done, too old, out of time. He grew up worshiping Stephen Curry, like millions of kids across Asia did, and he thought this was the year he'd have to say goodbye. And I need you to stay with me until the very end, because the final sentence he spoke about Curry stopped me in my tracks. And I promise it's going to stay with you long after this video is over. But you have to understand how he got there, because he did not start out kind. Let me paint the picture. In Japan, and honestly across all of Asia, Stephen Curry isn't just a basketball player. He's the reason a whole generation picked up a ball. The small guy who wasn't supposed to make it, who changed the entire sport with a jump shot from distances nobody thought were possible. This analyst is one of those kids, all grown up, now breaking down the NBA for a huge audience back home. And this summer, he looked at the Warriors' situation and with a heavy heart, decided it was time to be realistic. Time to admit the dynasty was over. He opened his breakdown by laying out the brutal facts, and I won't lie to you, they are brutal. Curry is 38 years old, Draymond Green is 36, Al Horford is 40 years old, still playing, and Jimmy Butler, the big midseason acquisition they built around, is coming off one of the most devastating injuries in the sport. A torn ACL suffered last season that ended his year and left him rehabbing a knee at 37 years old. The analyst pointed out that this is, by a wide margin, the oldest core in the entire NBA. And then he delivered the fact that he clearly thought would seal his argument. Last season, this team didn't even make the playoffs. They lost in the play-in tournament. The dynasty that once terrorized the league couldn't get out of the play-in. Case closed, right? That's what he thought too. And then he kept watching, because here's what happened. As he went deeper into the tape and the roster, he kept running into things that didn't fit his obituary. The first one was Curry himself. He put on the film from last season, and instead of watching a fading legend, he watched a man who is still, at 38, one of the most terrifying offensive weapons on the planet. The shooting hadn't declined. The gravity hadn't declined. Defenses still bent and broke around him the instant he moved without the ball. And the analyst said something that clearly unsettled his whole thesis. You cannot write the ending for a player who is still playing at this level. The body is older. The game is not. Then he looked at the context of that play-in season, and it complicated his story even more, because he reminded everyone why the wheels came off. Jimmy Butler was lost to that torn ACL. The team's depth got thin, and in the prior playoff run, Curry himself had gotten hurt at the worst possible time. This wasn't a team that had lost its talent, he realized. It was a team that had lost its health, and health, unlike age, can come back. Butler is rehabbing and expected to return next season, and suddenly the analyst had to ask himself a very different question. What does this team look like when it's actually whole? And here's where he started to turn, because he found the answer in the words of the Warriors' own front office. He quoted the general manager, who said something that the analyst admitted he couldn't argue with. The gist of it was this: at the end of the day, if you have Stephen Curry on your team and Steve Kerr is your coach and Jimmy Butler is healthy and back, then in a 7-game playoff series, you cannot confidently say this team can't beat anybody. And the analyst sat with that, and he realized it was true. This isn't a rebuilding roster. This is a battle-tested, championship pedigreed core that's simply been waiting to get healthy. Curry, still elite. Kerr, one of the greatest coaches in the sport, still on the sideline after choosing to return. Butler, a proven playoff bulldog on his way back. Draymond, the defensive brain who still understands the system better than anyone. That's not a corpse. That's a sleeping threat. And then he spent a long stretch on the coach, because he said you cannot evaluate this team without understanding the man on the sideline. Steve Kerr chose to return, and the analyst called that decision underrated and enormous. He said Kerr isn't just a great coach, he's one of the greatest offensive architects in the history of the sport. The mind who built a system of constant motion and off-ball movement that turned Curry's gift into a revolution. And crucially, Kerr's system is designed to protect older legs. It doesn't ask Curry to dribble the air out of the ball and create everything one-on-one. It asks him to run, to move, to weaponize screens and handoffs, to let the system do the heavy lifting. The analyst said that's exactly the kind of scheme that lets a 38-year-old remain devastating, because it hides age instead of exposing it. With Kerr running the show, he said, Curry can stay lethal for longer than anyone expects. Then he talked about the veterans around Curry, and he reframed their age as a weapon instead of a weakness. Draymond Green, at 36, is the defensive brain of the operation, a player who reads offenses like a book and organizes the entire defense with his voice and his instincts, the kind of intelligence that doesn't fade with age the way athleticism does. Al Horford, at 40, is the ultimate professional, a steadying presence who spaces the floor and mentors everyone around him. The analyst said this isn't a collection of washed-up names. It's a brotherhood of champions who know exactly how to win, who've done it before, who understand each other on a level that young teams simply can't replicate. Playoff basketball, he said, rewards experience and chemistry more than raw legs, and nobody has more of both than this group. Then he zoomed out to the thing that clearly moved him the most, the thing that separates this team from almost every other in modern sports: the loyalty. He said the plan, stated openly by both sides, is for Curry to finish his entire career in Golden State. One franchise, one city, start to finish. The analyst said that in an era where superstars chase rings by hopping from team to team, there's something almost sacred about a legend and a franchise deciding to ride it out together until the very end, out of pure loyalty and love. He said the front office has repeatedly made clear they want Curry to be the one franchise face of the Warriors for as long as he wants, and that Curry, on his side, has never wavered. That, the analyst said, is the kind of story that becomes legend, and it's the kind of bond that makes a team dangerous in ways that don't show up on a spreadsheet, because these men aren't playing for money or ego anymore. They're playing for each other. And he brought it back home to what Curry means across Asia, because it's personal for him. He talked about how Curry changed basketball in his country, how a whole generation of kids who were told they were too small, too weak, too ordinary, picked up a ball because Curry proved that the impossible was possible. He said that when he watches Curry now, he isn't just watching a player, he's watching the man who gave millions of people permission to dream. And he said that's exactly why he refuses to disrespect him with a premature obituary. You don't bury the man who taught you to believe. You honor him by taking him seriously until the very last shot, and that's when the rehook came. The moment he leaned in, he said, "I came here to say goodbye to the Warriors, but the tape won't let me." And then he made a confession that turned the whole thing emotional. But before I get to that, he did the thing that made me trust him completely. He refused to become a blind believer. He stopped and said, if I'm going to be fair to the doubters, I have to give them their due. And he laid out the real, honest case against Golden State, and it's a case Warriors fans need to sit with, because the concerns are legitimate. This core is ancient by NBA standards, and age doesn't reverse. It only pauses. Curry at 38, Butler coming off a major knee surgery at 37, Horford at 40, Draymond at 36. Any one of them could break down at any moment, and the margin for that on a title run is razor thin. The analyst also pointed out the financial trap. The Warriors are working with limited flexibility, walking a tightrope between fielding a competitive roster around Curry and not gutting what little future they have. He noted they've been linked to big names in free agency, but simply can't fit them under the cap without moving a major contract. They are, in his words, running it back largely because they can't afford to do anything else. And the window is measured in months now, not years. Every offseason is one fewer bullet in the chamber. That's real. That's the honest ceiling on this whole thing. And here's why that honesty made the turn land so hard. Because after laying out every reason to doubt them, he leaned back into the camera and delivered the emotional peak. He said the thing that separates a fan who understands the game from a hater who just reads the standings is knowing the difference between a team that's out of talent and a team that's out of time, and refusing to disrespect greatness on its way out. And he said that when he watches Curry, he doesn't see a player clinging on. He sees an artist determined to finish his masterpiece on his own terms. He talked about how Curry and the franchise have remained absolutely committed to each other. The plan, stated openly, is for Curry to finish his entire career in Golden State, the one franchise legend, the way it's supposed to be, but almost never is in modern sports. And the analyst said that means something. It means this isn't a team chasing a ring for ego. It's a team chasing one last dance for love of the game and love of each other. And then came the part that got me, the identity payload. He said that as someone who fell in love with basketball because of Stephen Curry, he owes it to that younger version of himself not to count the man out just because a calendar says he's old. He said greatness like Curry's doesn't fade on schedule. It burns until the very last night. And he said the rest of the NBA is making a dangerous mistake by looking at the Warriors' age and assuming they're safe. Because a healthy Curry, a returning Butler, a Hall of Fame coach, and a core that has won it all before is exactly the kind of team that ambushes a young contender in the spring when it matters most. He said the dynasty isn't dead, it's dormant, and dormant things wake up. And before he closed, he added one more thought that tied it all together. He said the rest of the league is comforted by the Warriors' age because it lets them avoid the terror of the Warriors' pedigree. But comfort, he warned, is how contenders get ambushed. He pointed to the young guard the Warriors are building around for the future, a piece who already understands Curry's rhythms and could carry the torch when the time comes. Proof that this isn't purely a last stand, but a bridge. And he said the truth every opponent quietly knows. No team in the sport wants to open a 7-game playoff series against a healthy Curry, a returning Butler, a Hall of Fame coach, and a core that has already climbed the mountain. You can talk yourself into their decline in October. You will not feel so brave in May. Then he did what he promised at the very start. He got quiet, looked into the camera, and delivered the closing line. The one that stopped me cold. He said, the whole world is trying to close the book on the Warriors, but I grew up on this man's jump shot, and I'll tell you what I know for certain. As long as Stephen Curry is standing on that floor, don't you dare bury them, because legends don't die in the play-in, they wait, and when they come back healthy, they take everything you thought was already yours. And that's where it ended, and I just sat there, because he's right. It's so easy to look at the ages and the missed playoffs and pronounce it over. It's the lazy thing to do. But a man who has loved this team from across an entire ocean, looked harder than the rest of us, tried to write the ending, admitted every single flaw honestly, and still couldn't bring himself to count them out. Because you don't bet against Curry. History has punished everyone who ever has. Every single year, someone declares the dynasty finished, and every single year, that someone ends up looking foolish when the lights come on in the spring. This analyst was honest enough to see it coming, and humble enough to refuse to make the same mistake. So now I want to hear from you, and I read every comment down there, so make it good. Do you agree with him? Is a healthy Warriors team, Curry, a returning Butler, Draymond, Kerr on the sideline, still a real threat in the West? Or has age finally caught up to the dynasty for good? Would you be scared to face this team in a 7-game series in the spring? Or are the doubts about the knees and the calendar just too much to overcome? Drop your take below and let's argue it out. I'll be right there replying. If this made you look at the Warriors differently, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell, because in the very next video, I've got another foreign voice breaking down one of the biggest teams in the sport. And this one just won it all. You will not want to miss what they said. I'll see you there.